If somebody were to ask you, who you are, bar, coffee shop, whatever, what would you say the answer to that is?
It's a good question. I'm a lot of different things, right? I'm a person, I'm a husband, I'm a
Hmm.
father, I'm a friend, I'm a neighbor, I'm a CEO, right?
Yeah,
Sometimes those blend together. Sometimes they're standalone, but lots of different things.
I love it, man. So let's get into the CEO aspect. What are you a CEO of? What do you do every day?
So I am CEO and founder of a company called Prize Out. We work in a lot of different industries, primarily financial institutions. We basically leverage our relationships with merchants to help put money back into the pockets of everyday consumers.
So how could we leverage that as an entrepreneur? Because we all take money and we all pay the 3% fee or whatever it might be on Stripe or whatever. So as an entrepreneur, how can we sort of navigate the waters there? What are some tips do you have in terms of optimization?
Yeah, for us, what we're really doing is leveraging data, right?
Okay.
So for our merchants, they're always in search to acquire customers, wherever it's Facebook, Instagram, Google, billboards, and Times Square, right? So for us, we actually do it through digital gift cards, right? So we put digital gift cards of brands in front of consumers, and
Mm-hmm.
anytime those consumers buy those digital gift cards, they essentially become a customer for that brand. So,
Right.
but our merchants want to target, right? And we're able to access transaction data. So if a Taco Bell says, can you get me somebody that loves Mexican food? We know that user A shopped at or recently went to Chipotle or Qdoba, right? So we know that they love Mexican food. So then we make that
Hmm.
match, right? Delivering a gift card to somebody that loves Mexican food and then delivering a customer to Taco Bell in that situation.
Interesting. What about privacy laws? I would think that there would be some sort of a stipulation where you can't share because the data that you have access to is super valuable,
Yeah,
but there are limitations in terms of how you can leverage it. How do you get around
totally.
it?
It's not get around it. We're not trying to get around it. We're trying to use it. So we
Hmm.
never share or sell. The merchants are merely bidding on buckets, right? Can you get me a 25 to 40-year-old male that lives in New York that likes Mexican food, right?
Okay.
And that person may exist in many different one of our partners.
Okay. So if I were to ask you any question that you think would be the most value for an entrepreneur, for a business owner, what would that question be?
Good question. Give me examples of adversity you face and how you overcome it, right? Because it's probably the biggest characteristic if you want to have success, right? Because people are going to tell you no, you're going to run into obstacles that you couldn't even dream of,
Yeah.
both personal and professional, right? Are you willing to kind of overcome anything that's thrown at you, right? Because you listen to, I
Mm.
just saw an interview for the NVIDIA CEO, and somebody asked him, if you could give advice to somebody that's looking to be an entrepreneur, what would you tell them? And he said, don't do it. He's like, it
Ah.
was way hard. It was
Yeah.
way harder than I ever thought, right?
Yeah. No kidding.
And that's somebody that is whatever NVIDIA is like a $4 trillion company now, right?
Oh,
So,
yeah.
that's somebody that has seen success, right? For every one of those, there's 1,000 people that tried and fail, right? So if somebody that has received the fruits of their labor, right? Imagine for all those that like
Yeah.
tried and failed, right? I live in New York City. It's funny, and obviously there's thousands of businesses all around them. And I'm always fascinated because, like in my neighborhood, one day there'll be a restaurant, and then maybe 6 months later it closes down, right? And the city keeps moving, nothing changes. But I'm like, man, like somebody had dreams, right? Somebody
Yeah.
started that restaurant, right? And they thought maybe they'll turn into a franchise and this and that and all that. They put their blood, sweat, tears into it, right? And now it's closed, right? And like with that, it's like dreams that are broken, right? And that exists every day in all different types of forms. So maybe that person starts another restaurant, and that's a success, right? But it's a tough business for sure.
I know it makes me sad, man. You go to one restaurant, it's packed, and then right next door, it's like dead empty, and you can see the servers and the owners like, "Come on in," you know. It's like
It's so true,
you're
right?
like, "Fuck, man," you know. It is what it is, dude. So there is adversity you're gonna face. There's ups and downs, and it starts with the downs a lot of the time. And so, you're at the lowest of the low. How do you get out of that, man? How do you get to the point where you're at the bottom and how do you
Yep.
make that first step to really start to gain that momentum up?
Irrational optimism, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Um, having honest, right? Like that
yeah.
example you just gave about the restaurant, right? Like it's not that this city doesn't like to eat out. Clearly, there's an example right next to you of a
Yeah.
restaurant that's succeeding, right? Learn from it, right?
Mm,
A lot of people treat their startups like a child, right? Like, and a lot of parents are have irrational optimism in a negative way, being like, oh, my child can never do anything wrong. They're the best, right? It's like,
mm,
no, right? Like, be honest. Like, maybe your original idea isn't great. Maybe you need to pivot, right? Don't fall in love with the original concept because chances are it needs to be iterated on 1,000 times.
mm. What about you, man? Did you have to iterate when you were starting out? What were some pitfalls, some turns you had to take that you weren't expecting to? And then how'd you adjust?
Well, it's funny, prize out now, right? Which, our last valuation was around million, so we're definitely in succeeding, right? Um, the was born out of a whole different startup. Like we're a fintech ad
Interesting.
tech company, right? But the idea was born out of a trivia app I had, right? So I went from trivia, that was a funded company, right? And while I was running the trivia company, I had a need for withdrawals and I started offering digital gift cards. And
Mm,
then I realized, wow, there's an opportunity where merchants can acquire customers through gift card withdrawals. Then I went to my board and I said, don't kill me, but we're going to go from trivia to like fintech ad tech. And they were like, yeah, let's do it. Number one, I'm lucky to have a supportive board, which is amazing. But also to see an opportunity that was bigger than the one I'm in and to let go of something and say, let's go in this direction. This one is proven. This one is not, but could be massive, right?
mm.
Obviously, if it didn't go well, then I'd be telling a different story, right? Still probably would have learnings and everything like that. But the idea of this was born in a totally different idea and different company.
Wow, from a trivia company to that. I mean, come on. That's not a pivot, man. You're changing tracks of the railroad.
Yeah,
It's a totally different freaking thing.
a
Not,
hundred.
how did you know that was gonna work? I mean, you didn't, right? But how
I
did you
did
know
it.
it was worth the massive work of taking the train off the tracks and putting it on a whole new trajectory?
The way I operate, I'm very internal. When I have an idea, I like to like keep it to myself and really stress test it for a while
Hmm.
until I feel like I've I've thought of every angle and I think it's going to work. And then you bring it out to the world and then you start talking to experts and like either it holds up, right? Or people are like, yeah, what about this or this, right? So I spent a year crafting the idea, thinking about it, testing it before I actually made the plunge, right? So you never know until you go to the free market and the free market either says, we're coming to your restaurant or you're not, right? But I was confident, right? Because I did my research, I did my due diligence, I stress tested with smart people, and ultimately you got to roll the dice, right? And is the reward worth the risk, right? It was a
Hmm.
much bigger industry dealing with payments and things like that than obviously trivia. So it was a calculated roll of the dice, and so far it's paid off.
No kidding. $1 million cap later, dude. It's like, damn. What about the internal processing that you had to go through to really start to say, okay, maybe this has some legs to it? Walk me through that year of contemplation to really start to realize, okay, so this is a step I want to take. Hey, I hope you're enjoying the podcast, and I want to let you know that I've got a free book that you can get if you want to tap into more of these resources. And you can get that for free at kylesbook.com. Back to the podcast.
Yeah, so with the trivia company, the concept was pretty simple. You could challenge friends or strangers in trivia, and the winner would get money. So, like I would say, hey, Kyle, I'm better than you in business 101, right? So we would each answer 5 questions. Whoever answered it the most accurately and the quickest would win the money. We each put up $5, right?
Mm.
So we people need a way to withdraw. So I started to let them to withdraw the digital gift cards, right? And then on the other side, I was spending a lot of money on Facebook trying to acquire customers. But I realized over time, like every time someone withdrew money to a gift card brand, that brand was basically acquiring a user. The same thing I was paying Facebook
Ah.
for. Wait a
Mm.
second, right? People
Mm.
love to withdraw to gift cards. That's obvious in all the data I have. Cool. Then I would just call some of the brands that we were offering their gift cards, and I said, "Would you pay to be a withdrawal option? And if we could give you targeted acquisition?" They were like, "Heck yeah!" So I was like, "Okay,
Mm.
customers like it. Businesses are willing to pay for it, right? Now I just have to build it, right? So if it works here, there's a good chance it'll work in other industries as well. And so far it has.
No kidding. So far it has. Yeah, Yeah, like you're like, oh, $400 million. And then you just kept going on with the conversation. Yeah, okay.
Well,
Not chump change.
yeah, the last 2 years, there's companies that were Stripe was 100 billion, now it's 50 billion, right? So like, it's things
Mm.
can change all the time, right? And if your goal is just money, you're never ever gonna be happy, and
True,
you're
man.
probably not gonna have success if you focus on doing something that you love. And for us, we're lucky. Obviously, it makes money for us, which is great, but also it's putting money back in people's pockets, right? So you're also doing good, right? And that's kind of a fringe benefit that I didn't expect, which is pretty awesome. And we work in like the credit union and community bank industry. And there,
Mm.
it's a great industry to work with as well. So it's really gratifying. And you want to do good for your partners. And that's really what drives me and my team. If you do good for customers, usually the money and the valuations follow, right?
Yeah, you're right. They're correlated directly. You got a strategic approach though. Like you took the middleman position and went full out on it.
Right.
It's you got it from both sides. What about the oh go ahead, man. You got something to add there. What is it?
No, 100%. I was just going to say a lot of people, it's funny, people come to me all the time with ideas. And I say, come back in 3 months. Are you still passionate about it? Right? Because everyone has
Mm.
ideas, right? Like, have you ever seen the movie Inception?
Oh yeah.
So like I think he says like the idea is like the most powerful virus there is, right? Like once it gets in your head, right, you become obsessed, right?
Yes.
But for some people, if it stands the test of time, after 3 months, if you're still passionate about it, right, and it's not just a fling, because most people are like, I got an idea, right? It's just like I'm going to run the marathon, and then a month later, like, how's that training going? I'm like, not really well, right? It's the same thing with
Um,
idea. Like,
mm.
can you not sleep at night? Are you obsessed with it, right?
Mm.
And does it stand the test of time? And if it does, it's something that may have legs, right?
What about the strategizing pro like you came up with something that's super high level. Not a lot of people would have seen that play that you saw. What's your creative thought process in terms of identifying strategies like that? I mean, if you're looking at any strategy you're going to implement, how do you think about it to begin with? What's the
Well,
inception of it?
it's all problem and solving, right?
Yeah.
So Prize Out, my company now, was born out of a problem I was solving for another company, right? Like it
Mm.
wasn't, it had nothing to do with it. It was the act of withdrawing money, right? So people would win money and then they would withdraw to gift cards. Like, great. I needed an off ramp, a way for people to get their funds, right? Gift cards are working, right? And then, like I said, on the other side, spending all this money on Facebook to acquire customers, right? And I'm like, and it's not like it's happened on day one. Over time, I'm really getting annoyed because I'm spending all this money at Facebook and it's inefficient acquisition, right? I'm like, oh, there's got to be a better way. And then over time, you're just like, wait a second, like this person just bought $100 Nike gift card with their winnings, right? Nike gift card, Nike just got a customer. That's what I'm trying to do with Facebook. Wait a second, right? And
Mm.
over time, it slowly comes together.
What about the fact that these are massive companies that you're dealing with, and you got to negotiate? You got to first of all get a spot at the table, and then be able to negotiate a deal with them and get them to take you seriously when you're a trivia company at the time. What was that
Exactly.
process like? To get in the rooms and then to make those deals happen?
It's everything. It's like not only it's raising more money, right? Like I had to raise a round after that, right?
Mm,
It's like trivia to this, what?
yeah.
But if you are passionate about it, they see it. If you
Mm,
have done your research and your due diligence and you can answer all the questions, and if it makes sense, like, because all founders have to be sellers in some way, right? You're selling a vision, right? And if you don't believe it, really believe it deep down, like no one else is going to believe it, right? So that passion has to come out, whether you're talking to a merchant or you're signing on a bank or you're trying to raise money, right? And you should be able, I'm a big believer in if you can't explain it to like a 8-year-old, you shouldn't you haven't got it down yet, right? So once you're at that moment where you could sit down with a buddy at a bar and you
mm.
can explain it to him in 30 seconds and he's not going to lose interest, then you've nailed it, right? Then you can go out and start evangelizing it and trying to get partners and money and things like that.
Okay, so let's say that you've got the elevator pitch. If you want to use the cliche term, you can explain it at a bar in 30 seconds. Somebody
Yep.
understands it and says, damn, that's a freaking good idea. Or maybe the opposite could equally be as good as saying, oh, no, it doesn't make any damn sense, or it's not a good idea. Like Walt Disney would say, he would ask 10 people what they thought of his ideas. And if all 10 of them said it was terrible, then he'd go along with it, right? He's like, okay, I'm going to do this. So either way, you could look at it from either way. But what about once you've got that explanation really simplified, because you could sit down at a journal and really nail that out and iron it out, like a blacksmith process, and you end up with a sharpened sword. What about bringing that sword, that 30 seconds to the right people? How do you know who to get in contact with? And then how do you actually go about giving that 30-second pitch and getting to that situation?
It's funny because so many people find that step daunting, right? Like, because I think they look at it at the entire universe. Like, where do I start, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's so much to do. You just start by starting. Do like go on LinkedIn, find if you're trying to reach merchants, try to find the contact info of the 1,000 people at Nike marketing, right? 999 won't respond, one will, right? Where that leads, who knows? And do that every
Mm,
day until maybe a low level person's like, oh, I know so and so. I'd love to introduce this. I'm really passionate about this, right? And then that leads to the next thing. And then what tends to happen is a domino effect, especially when you're trying to crack into an industry. Then you create relationships. And then that person's Nike is like, oh, my buddy at Urban Outfitters would love this, right? And then it
mm,
starts to build upon itself, right? And I'm just always just using examples, but like
mm.
you just have to do it. And like sooner or later, if you keep swinging, you're going to make contact, right? You get lucky by keep doing it, right? And eventually, what is it, a broken clock is right twice a day. Eventually, somebody's going to sit down and listen. And what's going to happen is, of course, it's still going to be raw. And you're at the very least, they're going to be like, it's an interesting idea, but this and that, you're like, oh, good point. I didn't think of that, right? So then when you're next, 1,000 more emails, right? When then that next
Yeah.
person answers, right?
Mm.
You're a little bit better, right? Depends if the person is built for that and they want to do that. That's why perseverance and determination is so important, right? Because you have to have 1,000 people say no, or even worse, not even respond at all, believing that all you need is that one opportunity and then you can take advantage of it.
Well, it's true. There's countless stories of it being the one introduction that changed everything. Yeah, and you never know when it's going to come. That's what's interesting about it. And I think
There's
that,
a,
go
uh,
ahead, man. Go ahead.
No, one of my favorite stories is Stephen King, his first novel, which was Carrie, right?
Yes,
He
yeah.
had he had sent it to like over 100 publishers and they all rejected it. So he took his manuscript and he crumpled it up and he threw it in the garbage, right? His wife came and took it
Yeah.
out, mailed it off to a different one, and then that person wrote back and said, "We'd love to publish this," right? Like you just
Right.
never ever know.
And then look what comes of it. Now he's Stephen King. Now you've got a $1 million company. It's like but what do you tell somebody who doesn't have that in them? I feel like it's either you got the tenacity, whether it be from traumatic events that sort of conditioned you to be able to deal with that moving forward, or the natural inclination to be striving regardless of what happens. What are some
Yeah,
additions that you have to that? How can we sort of engineer that perspication, that perseverance?
this is a conversation I have all the time now because I'm a dad, right? So
Ah,
think about, I have friends that extremely successful, but they've came from really tough
Yeah,
situations,
damn right.
right? And it's left scars, right? And while it's
Mm,
painful, it's also made them who they are, right? Um, and now with children, and like, especially now that these people have means, right? They're kind of like, oh, I don't want my child to experience what I experienced because it was hurtful and harmful, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, it made them who they are, right?
yeah.
So as a dad, and my children are 3 and 7, it's like they don't have the adversity that I did. Like, is it possible to manufacture it? Like, how do
Yeah.
you, because the world is tough and cruel and all that stuff. Like, how do you mimic that? Like, how do you prepare them for that? Right. Regardless if
Mm,
it's being an entrepreneur or not. Right. But like, overcoming adversity is so important in everything you do, whether it's your personal life or your professional life. Right. Like, it's something like, if you could put it in a bottle and sell it at Walmart, obviously that would be amazing, right? But it's something that you have to keep putting adversity in front of them and see how they overcome. It's kind of like if you want to learn how to swim, you just jump in and figure it out, right? Um, so I don't know what the answer is. What I would say is say yes to everything, right? And
mm,
put yourself in as many situations as possible, right? The one thing that is true, if you're at home watching reruns of The Office, nothing's going to happen, right? If
yeah.
somebody's like, hey, do you want to go play softball? Or, hey, do you want to come to me with this bar to meet this guy? Like, just say yes, right? Like,
Mm.
you never know what's going to happen, right? You never know who you're going to meet, right? But put yourselves in as many situations as possible, because at the very least, you're going to learn something.
Is that the character trait you'd attribute your success to, and a pattern you've noticed in others? Is that saying yes, that willingness to experience the unknown, and then being able to persevere through the shit of it?
Yeah, because it's funny. You see disruptors in industries, it's never within the industry, right? It's never like, I've been an engineer for 30 years at IBM and I realized the whole thing's broken. No, you are part of the system.
Right.
It's
Mm.
always an outsider coming in and being like, why do you guys do it this way? It's like, I
Yeah.
don't know. It's how we've always done it, right? That's crazy, right? And it's usually taking experiences completely outside that industry, right?
Mm.
Because they've experienced so many different things. It's better to be a Renaissance person because you can take learnings from all of it, right? In this day and age, right? It's probably more valuable than just being a jack of one trade, as opposed to being like a jack of many trades and being able to draw experiences and knowledges from all different industries, because they're all doing it different ways, right? So yeah, 100%.
Yeah, but it's hard though, dude, because you're stuck inside the jar in your industry. And so you're talking about getting that objective view to see the label from the outside when you are on the inside, right? How do you do that to be able to see that this works in this industry? Maybe it'll work in my industry too. What's that process look like?
Well, I think it's being curious, right? You can do,
Yeah.
like, in this day and age, this computer right here has access to endless information, right?
Yeah.
So learning, reading, watching podcasts like yours, learning from others. Um, Also do it when you're young, right? This generation, like when they're 22, it's like if they're not on the path, like their life's ruined. It's like, no,
Yeah.
just say yes to everything, experience everything, try different industries. You have no idea what you're good at yet or what makes you happy, right? When you're young, I would say, experiment with everything, say yes to everything. People, what fascinates me is people like, I got a interview offer. I don't know if I should go. I'm like, there is zero risk. There is zero. They may say, hey, we want to give you $10 million a year. Like, oh my God, like you have no idea unless you go. The very worst
Mm.
case scenario is they say no, or you're not interested, but you learned, right? And you got better at interviewing. So like, again, like say yes to all opportunities.
Yeah, and maybe they say no, but then they drop something, a little bomb that you can take to make that pivot. Or you meet
Totally.
somebody who looking back 30 years later, you're saying, whoa, that was the person. Like how Elton John met his singer or the writer of Elton John is the singer, damn it. How he met the writer of his songs, right?
Yeah.
He was just a random pull of the hat by a producer. And then they happened to meet, and it was now Elton John now, right? So you never know what's gonna happen. There's a huge lesson to learn there, dude. It's the mystery of it all, the adventure of it all, to expect the pivots from the trivia company to the $400 million multi-conglomerate organization where you're the middleman creating ultra strategic connections with folks. I mean, there's a mystery to it all, and I think that that's the point of it. And instead of focusing on the result, maybe focus more on the experience of it and see what happens, not attaching to something so much, forcing it to happen, but rather being willing to be nimble and make changes and adjustments along the way and see what happens, man. Because look what happened with you, and it's a
And
commonality.
totally, and like work backwards from the worst case scenario, right? Let's say
Hmm.
your endeavor is never successful, right? At the very least, you're not one of those timid souls that never ever tried and like
Yeah.
many their deathbed, I wish I tried, right? You have no regrets, right? You're going to have stories, right? You're going to be living interesting and rich life. Maybe the fortune doesn't come, but who cares? That's just money, right? Living richly and having experiences and putting yourself out there and being scared and taking
Mm.
chances. That is what real life is about. And regardless if you find the success or not, you're still probably lived a way better life than the people that have sat at that, desk for 30 years and wish that they tried to do something, right? So, I think regardless if it's success or not, success is not just financial or anything like that, right? You can say, I left nothing on the table. Like I put it all out there, right? And that is
Mm.
for me like a life well lived, in my opinion. So if you're okay with that, and you understand that the goal isn't, to make fortune and fame, like you're still going to walk away a winner, right? And like I talk to a lot of people that fail, like nobody regrets it, right? Nobody's like, I wish I
Yeah.
didn't do it. You only hear the people that wish their only have regrets that they didn't try, right? So
Mm.
at least that comforts me, regardless of what happens. Like I've got stories, I've got experiences, I've got wisdom I would have never attained unless I went down this entrepreneurial path.
Yeah, and it's something you can see looking backwards as opposed to, well, if you get caught in the moment of it, you can be like, fuck, I wish I wouldn't have done that. But maybe a few months later, you look back to that moment and are grateful that you did it because now you're seeing the bigger picture. So there's something to that, man. And I know you got to run here, brother. So I'm going to respect your time. Is there anything else you got to add before we kick this off here?
No, I think this has been one of my favorite conversations. I love, you can tell you're passionate because you know the stories. Like I told Stephen King, you use Elton John, right? So you're always seeking those examples. For me,
Yeah.
like Mark Twain said, I never let school get in the way of my education, right? Like
Yeah. Right.
I learned by doing and watching, right? And like I like hearing real life stories and examples of people that have done it, right? And that's how I learn, right? So you seem like a similar person by using examples of people, right? Because it's true, right? Like they exist, whether it's Walt Disney or Elton John or Stephen King, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and we don't know if we're going to be one of those, but we do know that we can have the adventure of a lifetime if we strive to accomplish something great. And you have, man. So I want to appreciate you for that. And we will keep in touch, dude. Thank you for sharing what you've shared with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure. Fascinating individual you are.
Thank you, Kyle. I appreciate the time.
I appreciate you, man. Okay, we'll talk soon. Okay.
Take care.
See you, Dave. All right. I hope you enjoyed that podcast episode. And if you want to get a free copy of my book, go to kylesbook.com and you can get a copy there. I'll talk with you soon.